Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we are taking a look at the bracket for the Asia region main event that will be taking place starting actually tomorrow, the 27th of September. First of the games kicking off then. Good time for all. So let's talk about the teams competing and I'll show you my predictions for the bracket. So here is the blank bracket that you can see here. The teams competing in this tournament, you have Team Falcons, the team that finished first in Korea. 99 Divine, the runners-up in the Pacific region. Lazuli, who finished first in Japan, will be taking on Poker Face, the team that made it through the wild card event. You have Crazy Raccoon taking on Bleed Esports. Crazy Raccoon third in Korea, somewhat shockingly low for them. And Bleed Esports, the team that finished first in Pacific. And then finally, Nyam Gaming, or Nyam Gaming, I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce it, who finished second in Japan, taking on Zeta Division, who finished second in Korea. Some very interesting teams. A few changes have been made to some of these rosters since I last talked about these teams back at the beginning of the stages for them, but nothing, too wild. Obviously, Zeta Division adding Pelican to their damage line to add a little bit more there. Crazy Raccoon bringing in Knife for a third damage slot, and then 99 Divine, the Kame, leaving the team, and they bring in Ray Momo to be the replacement. So, other than that, no real changes. So, let's talk now about my picks for the bracket. Here it is. This is what I think is going to happen. I don't think this should come as a surprise to much of anybody. It feels like this is the path to expect, but let's break down the games that I have kind of round by round, give you my explanation on why, and we'll kind of explore the bracket in that way. So, round one, you have Team Falcons versus 99 Divine. I think a lot of people, myself included, clearly are fully on board with the train that this is going to once again be Korea domination. I think there is a world where the teams competing in Pacific or Japan could compete with teams in Korea, but they have to compete with the four best teams coming out of Korea and not some of the other teams, right? And I think you have to just understand how much the level of play in Korea is just better, right? Lazuli and Nyam Gaming come in from Japan, beating the obviously the two previous Japanese teams that made it out. The biggest one being Veryl. And part of the reason why Lazuli and Nyam were able to do as well as they did is because they both added Korean players. Lazuli with Hidden and Shui, two very well-known Korean players from, recent teams and recent initiatives. Hidden was recently on Poker Face, the beginning of this year, leaving the team, taking a little bit of a gap in that first stage, didn't compete, but played on Panthera last year for a time, played on Poker Face, played on NT, has been around on a number of different teams. Shui, of course, an Overwatch League veteran, played with London Spitfire years ago. So, really, you look at it, and it's not that surprising that some of these teams that have come over have added some Korean talent. But there's a big difference between adding a couple of Korean players to a team, most of which are not the top-level Korean players, and then trying to compete against the best of the best from Korea, which is still, as much as it may hurt for some people to hear, the best region in Overwatch. So I think round one, it's pretty simple, right? It should be domination by the Korean teams. I think it should be, playing out about as we expect, especially when you look at Korea. Even Korea has tiers, which is basically just Team Falcons and Crazy Raccoon are 1 and 2, or 2 and 1, depending on the order you want to put them in. Right now, Team Falcons looks like the better team, but we'll see. And then you have Zeta 3 and Poker Face 4. That is it. Those are your rankings. Those are your tiers. There is not really much of reason to think that these other teams have a major chance at upsetting the Korean teams. So I have all of them advancing. We'll talk more about the Japanese and Pacific teams when we get to the lower bracket. But let's advance to the upper bracket semis. This would, of course, set up a game between Team Falcons and Poker Face. Now, this is a very interesting matchup. I really like this Poker Face roster. What they've done, they made a very interesting team, drawing players from a number of different teams. I think they grabbed players from like the old roster that Decay was on. I can't remember the name of the team, but the one that really just underperformed. I think they grabbed some players from Runaway. Bellasteria was competing on Zeta Division. They brought a bunch of very high-level players into this team, and they made a very good Korean roster that looks like it's going to be one of the better teams here in the region, which is a pretty big deal. So I'm excited to see where this goes. But Poker Face did beat Team Falcons the last time they faced off against each other. They played each other in the seeding decider matches back at the beginning of the month. Poker Face with a 3-1 victory over Falcons. So this is a very, very close group. There is a lot of talent in these teams. Very good players here. Like I said, Falcons, yes, they won that grand final 4-1 over Zeta Division. Crazy Raccoon got that 3-0 third place finish. But you look at, within those seeded decider matches, Crazy Raccoon 3-0'd Poker Face. Poker Face 3-1 Falcons. Crazy Raccoon 3-0'd Falcons, and then lost to Falcons later on in the semifinals. Poker Face 3-2 over Zeta Division, and then when they rematched later on, it was a 3-1 for Zeta Division. So there is a lot of... This is a very close region, and it really could go either way. But consistently, we've seen Falcons perform at a higher level. And you have to favor them here. I also think that this meta is looking to be a little bit better for them than what we've seen. There was a meta shift, I believe, from the seeding decider matches to the playoffs. I could be wrong, but I think that was when it started, when Juno got added. It may have been, I guess it probably would have been those. Juno's been around for a little bit of time. But I think you have to look at what Falcons have been able to do. They obviously are a very good roster. They have really good players. You can play any main tank comp when you have Smurf. You can play Hanbin as well, obviously on his best heroes. You just put Proper in on heroes that he can do well on, and you have a good support line for Chio and Fielder. If they can play heroes they're good at, it is very tough to beat this team, even at their best. There is, I don't think, a single spot, unfortunately, on Poker Face where they are even or ahead of Team Falcons in terms of like a player-for-player comparison. It is very difficult to overcome that when you don't have the mechanical advantage in any of your matchups. You would really need Choice of One and Proud to step up and have a monster game to really, really define that and really come up big. And it's possible that they can do that. We've seen these players, perform at the highest of levels. But Team Falcons basically, it's the notion of like, Poker Face has to get lucky every time. Falcons has to get lucky, once, basically, right? Like, at some point, Falcons has one thing go their way and it kind of rolls the map. It's a lot of that kind of feeling about it, where it is just an uphill battle, I think, for Poker Face. Even though they were the 2 seed going into the semifinals and stuff, it just feels like Falcons should be the favorite in that game. Then that would, of course, be mirrored by Crazy Raccoon Zeta Division. Same idea, of course. I think Crazy Raccoon is in the better position. They obviously have struggled a bit recently. They had a very close game when they played in the seeding decider matches. They didn't play in the playoffs, of course, because Team Falcons had to play Crazy Raccoon. And Zeta Division played Poker Face. So we haven't seen them play since that 3-2 seeding decider match. Absolutely could go either way. It definitely is fully meta dependent. I think it's interesting to look at where these teams are currently. I think, especially considering just what they can do. Like I said, Zeta Division brought in Pelican, presumably to be able to have a little bit more flexibility in the flex DPS role. Maybe Pelican can play, more of the Echo at a high level, or the Tracer, even though those are very good heroes for ATVI and Flora. Tracer, Flora's a good Tracer player. ATVI is a good Tracer player. But maybe you want something a little more solid, a little more solidified. I don't know. Pelican's a weird addition a little bit. I do think that he's a very good player. I think he's one of the few players that you just kind of bring in because he's a high-level talent that can do a lot. It is a bit of a weird team for him because I think the ATVI Flora dynamic is so good. And Pelican and Bernard do have some history playing together. Obviously, Violet played with them too. So you're bringing in some of that Houston Outlaws team from last year and trying to replicate some of that success. It's an interesting one to see. I still think Crazy Raccoon are a better team. Knife, another addition that is a little odd, though I think that Knife is a bit more flexible in ways that Hisang and Lip aren't, which I think could be the reason why he's there. Lip is a hit scan player. Lip is a hard hit scan player. He's playing your Sojas, your Widows, your Ashes, your Cassidys, your Sombra, obviously. Those are the heroes he plays at the highest level, whereas Hisang is more of a flex DPS player. He can play your Genji, your Tracer, your Echo. Knife is a much more flex or hyper flex player. He's not necessarily the same level as some of your other ones. But he's a solid player all around. And he can play your Tracer, he can play your Echo, he can play your Soj, he can play some of your hit scan and some of your flex DPS, which is something that I don't think they really have out of Hisang and Lip. It's not to say that neither of those players have any ability to flex off of their comfort roles. But I think what Knife provides you with potentially is a little bit more of a place to kind of pivot your way over to running more of a kind of dynamic look where you can run a little bit more flexible things. And I think it opens up Hisang and Lip to just play fully to their strengths, having someone you can kind of just pair if you really need to, and say, here's a map where you really need a good Widow player, right? And you want Lip on the Widow, you can put Lip on the Widow. But if you wanted to have a map where you need a Widow player, and you don't want Lip, you want Lip in, but you want Lip on Sombra, or you want Lip on Soj, or something like that, it's nice to have an option to bring in Knife to be able to fill that other role, which is why I think they brought him in. And I think that will help this team be a little bit more flexible. I don't think that was really a problem. I always felt like their DPS duo was a little bit more well-rounded than Team Falcons before they brought in Happy. Now I think you kind of see they're maybe looking at this and saying one of the problems is that Falcons have figured out a rotation of DPS that really works for them. And now you have to figure that when you look at what other teams are able to do, you want to be able to be map dependent, or not map dependent, right? And when you look at what Team Falcons has, right, all of the teams now, that the top 3 teams, even you already the top 4 teams, all of the Korean teams, are basically copying the Falcons roster strategy, which is 3 DPS, 2 tanks, 1 main tank, 1 off tank, and then support flexibility. Now, Zeta and Crazy Raccoon only have the 2 supports, but they have 2 supports that are both very flexible, so it's a little bit different. But like Poker Face, 3 DPS, 2 tanks, 3 supports. Team Falcons, 3 DPS, 2 tanks, 3 supports. It seems like there is a little bit more of a fear of ending up in a position where Team Falcons can really control map picks and really control the way everybody else plays by picking the maps very specifically that hurt a team's ability to play to their strengths. So it feels a bit more like Zeta and Crazy Raccoon are trying to overcome that by bringing in these additions, right? And so this is a game I'm very excited to see when they kick it off, because I think that you have 2 teams that are both very good, very solid, that have had very good matches. I actually think, despite the fact that Team Falcons has beat Crazy Raccoon, I don't think Zeta has won a game against Crazy Raccoon at all between any of the stages. I think Zeta Division plays Crazy Raccoon very well. I think Zeta Division is one of the few teams that actually isn't afraid of them, is able to kind of match what they're able to do, because I think, Bernard's a really good tank player, and I think he can match up very well with, say, Max. You have, Violet on flex support or main support is really, really good. Like, he's one of the greats in the game. And I think Alfie has been a really good flex DPS player. So they have some of those ability to kind of match them. But I think Crazy Raccoon are just too good. They've been way too good in tournaments. They get into the big games, they don't care anymore, right? They win every tournament they've been in so far, even when they lose games, right? Like, they've lost to Falcons in, the Korea finals in two. Well, I guess they didn't lose them in the Korea finals this time around. They lost them in the Korea semifinals, but they didn't win Korea last time, and they won Asia, and they won EWC, and they won the midseason major. So I find it really difficult to look at Crazy Raccoon and not think they are going to once again pull it out. They didn't look great in the meta change, but they've had enough time, I think, to iron that out and flesh it out, and I think they'll be just fine. I think they will be victorious over Zeta Division. That, of course, would set up a Team Falcons Crazy Raccoon upper bracket final. I'm just going to say Falcons wins the first matchup because they seem to win that first game all the time. And then it's the Crazy Raccoon lower bracket run that you have to be afraid of. But I'll talk about them later because you can see that game is going to be back for the grand final. So back to the lower bracket now. We get the Pacific versus Japan showdown once again. We had it last time around. Obviously, Bleed, formerly the... Oh, man. Why am I drawing a blank on the name of what Bleed used to be? DAF. And then Honeypot pretty much became 99 Divine. They obviously were victorious over the Japanese teams. There was a very close game between Honeypot and Insomnia, if I remember correctly. But DAF kind of pounded Varel. So I think this time around, the games should be a little bit closer. As much as I don't know if the Japanese talent on these two teams is as good as it was in, say, Varel. I don't really know. I didn't watch a lot of Japan this time around. I think when you just look at the level of competition, obviously, Bleed Esports has a couple of Korean players. There's Sungan and Maka. 99 Divine as opener. So there are some Korean players on all of these teams. But Pacific has consistently been better than Japan in the recent kind of tournaments and times that they play. They're just a very good region, a very good group that have managed to kind of do quite well. They're a little more diverse than Japan, obviously. Japan is kind of young in the Overwatch esports scene. Asia, Australia, obviously a part of that as well, but Southeast Asia, that Pacific region, has been doing it for a while. Thailand has been really, really good for a long time. So I think Japan is still behind the eight ball a bit. I think they're still just kind of catching up to everybody else. And so right now I would still favor the Pacific teams to manage to find a win here. But once again, I think it just sets up them to be defeated by the Korean teams again. I'm going to take Zeta Division over 99 Divine. I'm going to take Poker Face over Bleed. I have not seen anything from these specific teams for me to think that they have what it takes right now to beat these Korean teams, which are still some of the best in the world. This sets up a Zeta Division Poker Face rematch, which would be nice and fun to see. Right now, I have to favor Zeta Division because they won the last time these two teams played. I think they're the better team. They've been consistently the better team. They struggled in that week of the seeding decider matches. They were not as good as they were kind of earlier in the stage and in the tournament. So it was a bad week for them. I don't think that necessarily reflects the entire team and what they've been able to do. They've consistently been a better performer against both Crazy Raccoon and Team Falcons. They had a very good run in the Esports World Cup. I think you can't really look at this Zeta Division team and feel bad about them. They've been consistently among the best teams in Korea, and I feel pretty good that they still have what it takes to push it to that lower bracket final once again for a top 3 finish. This would set up another game between Crazy Raccoon and Zeta Division. Once again, Zeta Division, I am sorry, but I don't think you're getting past Crazy Raccoon. I think they're just too good. Frankly, I think Crazy Raccoon is, simply put, the better team here. I really like Zeta Division. I want Zeta Division to make it. Let me be very, very clear. Zeta Division is my favorite team in Korea. I want to see them do well. I want to see them make it all the way to Stockholm. I think it'd be awesome to see a different team make it. Ideally, Crazy Raccoon and Zeta Division make it. Personally, those are the two teams I'm rooting for here. But I think realistically it will be Crazy Raccoon and Team Falcons, because I think right now they are the two best teams in the region. And I find it very difficult to think anything else happens. And unless, Zeta Division is able to beat Team Falcons and Crazy Raccoon is able to beat Team Falcons, it's very difficult for those two teams, Crazy Raccoon and Zeta Division, to make it. So, unfortunately, I don't know if my dream will become reality. But this would set up a Crazy Raccoon Team Falcons Grand Finals. And I don't know what it is about Team Falcons, but when it comes to Grand Finals, when it comes to these big games where they can win in the upper bracket, something about the Grand Finals comes along and they just kind of stop looking good and kind of stop caring as much as they did. And they seem to not look as good as what we would have seen. So, we'll see if anything different happens. We'll see if Team Falcons can close out a tournament bracket. People are going to talk about Korea. Korea is very different. To me, winning Korea is not as big as winning Asia. Yes, I get it. There's more competition in Korea, but there's fewer games. It isn't a double elimination bracket. It's literally just it's Falcons had to win 3 games to get there against competition that they won and they were out. They didn't have to retest themselves. In order to win this, they would have to win 4 games, which is, you might be like, it's just one more game, but that's 4 games minimum, right? If they were to lose in the upper bracket finals, they'd have to play an additional 5th game, right? So this is more games, and you're at the end of the day, you still have to get through, most likely at minimum, 2 of the best teams in Korea. And you have to, beat Crazy Raccoon twice, or beat Zeta Division twice, or beat Poker Face twice. You're not getting there without beating one of the other Korean teams twice. So I think it is reasonable to look at this and go, this is a bigger deal. This is a harder thing to win than it is to win Korea. So that's just me. That's why, to me, this is the bigger tournament. That's why when people say, Korea this, Korea that, I don't care about Korea. I don't think winning Korea really means anything, because I think what matters is winning the bigger main event where you actually have to travel and play teams from other places, and you have to play this double elimination bracket. All that stuff matters a lot. And I think there is a bit of erasure of how much different it really is to kind of play through a bracket like this. But I'm going to take Crazy Raccoon. Like I said, they've looked better in tournaments. They've looked better in finals. I just think they seem to click at the end of these grand finals. Something seems to spark in them that seems to also just fall apart in Team Falcons. Also, Crazy Raccoon have been so good in this stage. Yes, there was a meta shift, but I think that they will have time to adjust and adapt and get back into form to look like what they've looked like. I just can't doubt this team that has looked unbelievable. Right? They lost, one game? They lost one game since Esports World Cup. Even going back, they've lost one game, I think, since Esports World Cup. They've lost one game. You expect me to not pick them to win? Get out of here. They're still the best team in the world until Team Falcons can win a tournament, a big tournament, right? I still think even if Crazy Raccoon doesn't win this, Falcons is only the best team, or only better if they can win at Stockholm. And I will throw that out there. I will say that. I will still pick Crazy Raccoon to be the best team in the world. Team Falcons can dethrone them in the big tournament. But there you go. Those are my thoughts on the Asia bracket. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, where you agree, where you disagree. Do you think Falcons is going to win? Do you agree with me with Crazy Raccoon? Or are you a true believer in Zeta Division or Poker Face or one of the other 4 teams? Are you really going to pick against Korea like that? I don't know, man. But I want to hear from you in the comments down below. And, of course, if you enjoyed this video and want more like it in the future, consider liking and subscribing, because your support is always appreciated. But that is going to be all for me for today. Thank you all so much. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.